So I feel like it was inevitable given the direction my hyperfixations have been going since joining the Welcome Home fandom, but recently I've been watching My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and getting into video essays about the show. And I was inspired by one creator, Starstrike, who makes content covering some of the My Little Pony fandom's controversial opinions and hot takes. And I thought, I wonder what some of my viewers' hot takes on Welcome Home and the Rainbow Factory AU are. So, I took to my TikTok and YouTube community comments, and I asked you guys what your hot takes within the fandom are. And, oh boy, there is some tea here, and it is hot. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First up, from Misdemeanor. You know, it's only just now that I realized that that's your name. Misdemeanor? Anyways, they said, Frank is better suited being a scientist with a fun bug hobby rather than being a ranger. I actually disagree with this one. First up, for those who don't know, this is actually part of Internet Mom's canon lore to the Rainbow Factory AU. Frank is a forest ranger that mainly looks after the forest that surrounds the Rainbow Factory, but he and his fellow rangers actually play a bigger role than just taking care of the forest. His job, as Walden's employee, is to make sure that any hikers and campers that go into the forest don't find the factory. For context, the Rainbow Factory is built into the side of a mountain. There's a massive force field surrounding it that uses technology that allows it to be camouflaged against the scenery, and there are signs to ward off any would-be trespassers from wandering too deep onto factory property, because those who wander too far onto factory property are usually captured and are used as test subjects for Walden's experiments. Frank's job is to make sure that it never comes to that. And I think that makes them far more interesting as a character in this AU than I feel like he would be as just a scientist. But hey, to each their own. Walden definitely smokes/has unhealthy coping habits. I mean, I think it's still canon that he used to smoke, but has since quit. But unhealthy coping habits for sure. My money is on binge eating, considering how many times YN has to tell him to not touch their food, or is concerned about him eating all of the food in Internet Mom's audio series. I mean, I get it. Man needs to eat too. But relax, Walden. Wallace has no redemption and definitely doesn't love Francine or Wally. Ooh. This is actually a tough one for me. Is Wallace a bad person? Kinda, yeah. But his entire backstory makes it a little complicated. Keeping it to just his relationship with Walden and Francine for now, according to Internet Mom, Wallace did try to make his marriage to Francine work. Were his attempts good? No, and they were mostly brushed off by Francine. Did this man basically cut a deal with Harold and didn't realize that he could actually love Francine until after she had died? Yeah. Basically, their marriage was messy. And the tragedy of it is that it didn't need to be that way. As for Walden, Internet Mom describes Wallace as feeling neutral about him. Which is really fucked up to feel towards your own son. Basically, he didn't hate him and cared enough about Walden to teach him how to stand up for himself and fight back when he was being bullied in school. But Wallace still isn't going to be winning any Father of the Year awards, since I'm pretty sure he was still physically and emotionally abusive towards his only child. All in all, I think if Wallace were to fully acknowledge that he treated Walden and Francine horribly and started putting in the work to actually be better, we could at least say, yeah, you're a piece of shit, but at least you realize that now. Glad you learned the lesson that you needed to learn. I don't know, I think I'm too biased for this one. We'll be coming back to this topic later, trust me. Finally, Misdemeanor says they're not a fan of opposite RF. Honestly, I wasn't either at first, but only because of Dodo's old rule of no making AUs of the Rainbow Factory AU, and I was kind of like, what the heck, you can do that, but we can't? Why? But I've actually grown to like opposite RF. And that's a bad thing, because opposite RF is confirmed to be pure evil and a master manipulator. He is literally a walking red flag, and I am just putty in his hands. By the way, opposite rags is a thing. Here's a picture. Next up is my friend Doll Doll, who opens with, "The factory needs to explode." Honestly, I could go with or without that one. Objectively, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, yes, there is a purpose to the Rainbow Factory, but at what cost, you know? Alright, we have reached a hot take that seems to have the fandom split onto two sides, and this one involves Walden and Julie's divorce. So, forget the bad ending series for a moment. Forget the old lore. In Internet Mom's lore, after Ophelia died, Walden basically cut all contact and fabricated the story surrounding Ophie's death, framing it as a heart condition, if memory serves, when really, she fell into a grinder because Walden wasn't watching her. After which, Julie had what can only be described as a complete and utter crash out. How did said crash out go, you may ask? Let's see. I think this is the canon. Called Walden's father and gave him all of Walden's contact information, destroyed half of the stuffed bear that Francine had given to Walden, burned letters from Francine to Walden, whatever personal items that belonged to Francine that were given to Walden he still doesn't have, and for the record, I don't know if this means that they were destroyed, burned, or just taken. Regardless, took all of Ophie's items and stored them, including gifts that she'd given him and photos, denying him access to any part of her, and made up her own reasons as to why she was divorcing Walden and informed both of their families. Basically, like, making up the excuse that he was an alcoholic or something. Okay! Now that we've painted that lovely picture, one side of the fandom, like Doll Doll states, thinks that while Julie handled the divorce poorly, the crash out was still kind of valid. And I can see where they're coming from with this, because on top of what happened to Ophelia, Walden actually lied to Julie about where they were going and what they would be doing. In the Color of Madness story, Walden tells Julie, and Ophelia was initially under the impression that they were just going to go out and get ice cream. Walden was the one that decided to take her with him to the factory and got sidetracked with work. And then suddenly, Ophelia is dead, nobody is telling Julie what really happened to her, and her husband cuts all contact. You gotta admit, that's kinda messed up. On the flip side of this argument, we have my friend Aiden, who thinks that the way Julie handled the divorce was absolutely disgusting, and the amount of people defending her is disturbing. Personally, I think both things can be true at the exact same time. From beginning to end, what Walden did was wrong. Lying to Julie, getting wrapped up at work and not keeping a closer eye on his daughter, cutting all contact, covering up the truth of Ophelia's death. All of that was wrong. Would it have made the situation any better if he had just gone and said, yeah, I lied. I took Ophelia back to the factory, got sidetracked with work, and she fell into an industrial-sized grinder? No, but the amount of deception that was there does not put him in the right. However, my slander of Julie is officially justified because what the fuck was that? Here's where I would have drawn the line, okay? Giving Wallace all of Walden's personal contact information. Okay. Taking all of Ophelia's belongings. Okay. Making up a reason for their divorce. Okay. I can understand that. I can justify that. But going so far as to take, ruin, or completely destroy the only physical traces Walden has left of his mother? That is not okay. That is the line, for me, where Julie went from being completely in the right of the situation to being completely in the wrong. So yeah, I believe both sides of the divorce argument are true here. How Walden and Julie both handled the situation was wrong. And remember, you can condemn the actions of your favorite character and still like them. This one is from my friend Zaya, who says, this is like extremely controversial, but Internet Mom is the better owner. Dodo is great, but I feel like they paid more attention to Walden than the lore of the other characters. Overall, I agree. However, I feel like it's important to remind the fandom what so often gets overlooked. Dodo was, and still is, a minor who originally created the Rainbow Factory AU as a way of joining in on the fun in the Welcome Home fandom. They never expected it to blow up in the way that it did, and before long, RF became this massive thing that they had no way of reining back in. That's all without mentioning the people who intentionally went out of their way to go against their boundaries, which wound up driving them out of the fandom completely. Even today, when Dodo decides to just casually revisit RF and Welcome Home in their artwork, they have people jumping on their case, asking if they're coming back, if they're going to resume making RF content. They cannot catch a break. I think trusting Internet Mom with RF and the lore was the best decision Dodo could have made for their mental health, and that Internet Mom has a good handle on the characters, the story, and the fandom for it as a whole. Keep up the good work if you're watching this. I don't know if this is controversial, but I think YN would be the one to keep Walden from going completely insane. You right. I can understand how people hate Wallace, but I can't help but feel he was also a victim, as he was abused by his father. Yet, see, this was the shit I was talking about. There is a very good reason why I have not, nor will I ever be doing audios of William Darling. This man can only be described as a monster. His only redeeming quality, if you can even call it that, is that he genuinely loves his wife, and if, hypothetically, she were to ever leave him, he'd pull all the stops to try to win her back. But that doesn't really mean much because he's a piece of shit that cheats on his wife. Just as well, let's list the reasons, shall we? Expected Wallace to act like an adult since pretty much day one. He would put out cigars on Wallace's arms, hence why Wallace always wears long sleeves. He accidentally broken Wallace's bones. I don't even know how you do that. How do you accidentally break somebody's bones, let alone your own child's? Wallace has several fake teeth as a result from his father's physical abuse. He would hit Wallace if he got bad grades in school, which, as Wallace has undiagnosed ADHD, was really hard for him, making Wallace write out math problems until his hands bled, forcing him to stay awake to read or face the consequences if he fell asleep. Dude! And this guy had the audacity to brag about how great Wallace was in public, but never treated him that way at home? Any of this sounding familiar? Yeah, I incorporated this bit of lore into the Bad Ending series with Mordecai and his issues surrounding William. So yes, Wallace is very much a victim here, and it's easy to see how he became the person that he became. However, say it with me now, Trauma is not an excuse for abuse. Go to therapy, Wallace. For the record, William Darling is the only character that I will say deserves to have Alzheimer's. Jeremy deserves more attention from the fandom, both in the Bad Ending series and from the fandom in general, because he's too much fun of a character to be seen as just a joke. Honestly, we should be astounded that this man even became remotely canon. For context, the existence of Jeremy as a concept started out as a joke. It was just a running gag amongst the audio makers of the Rainbow Factory AU fandom that if there was a worker that was messing with Walden or his assistant, or if anything went wrong inside of the factory, it was Jeremy. The phrase, "It's always fucking Jeremy," could be found in every single comment section it was mentioned. And for the record, both Dodo and Internet Mom incorporated this guy into their works to some extent. But in Internet Mom's story specifically, Jeremy isn't a real person. Rather, he was a person that was made up by the worker population to shift the blame off of them if something went wrong or if something didn't get done. As a result, Walden ends up going after any worker whose name bears a close resemblance to the name Jeremy. The concept as a whole is just so dumb, and I love it. As for Jeremy Marsh, my Jeremy, this character is 100% there, and I tried to have him live up to the chaos. From Connolly Thompson. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, CT. I'm sorry to say this, even though Julie and Walden absolutely loved Ophelia, I feel like she deserved better and probably could have gone home with a different family and lived a better life. Big hearts with great intentions, but poorly executed for her sake. Personally, I have to disagree here. Internet Mom has stated that overall, Walden and Julie were great parents, and that if Ophelia's demise had never happened, it would have resulted in a happy ending. Walden and Julie's romance would have flourished. Ophelia would have grown up to take over the Rainbow Factory for Walden, and Walden would have been able to live out the rest of his life peacefully in retirement. But this is the Rainbow Factory AU. We're not allowed to have nice things. And one bad decision that Walden made that Harold took full advantage of had catastrophic consequences for everyone involved. Except for Harold. From Star Celestial, first they want to know about Spectra and how it works. Honestly, I don't know much myself, but here's what I can say. Spectra is the pure color extracted from a person, be they human or Muppet. It's not like flesh or blood, as that material gets separated away from the spectra during the grinding process, but we do know that it does contain some level of magical healing properties, as Walden is using the spectra to develop a cure for... Whoa! I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure that's top secret information. Silly me. Yeah, that about covers it for the Rainbow Factory AU. Their next question was, how is Walden able to see ghosts and spirits, even though Wallace can't see them? So, I'm not sure if Walden being able to see ghosts and spirits is still canon or not, but originally it was linked to his feline genetics. As cats are believed to have the ability to see ghosts and spirits, Walden was also originally given this ability by Dodo in order to still be able to see and speak to Ophelia's spirit after she passed. The reason Wallace doesn't have this ability is because he's not part cat. He's described as just being a humanoid Muppet. Thus, he doesn't really have any abilities that are stereotypically linked to an animal or a creature. Angel Cakes 88 just wants to see people fight, apparently. Or if Wally could beat HR Wally in a fistfight. You right. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If these two were to square off against each other, Rainbow Factory Wally would put Hidden Rainbow Wally in the med bay. I love my child, but facts are facts. Mordecai could beat Wallace in a fist fight. Actually, if Wallace really wanted to, I believe he could knock Mordecai onto his ass. In the canon, Wallace is into professional boxing. We're talking about the man who taught Walden how to fight. And in my audios, Mordecai doesn't walk around with a walking stick because he's a pompous rich guy. He walks with a walking stick because he has a bad leg. Basically, Mordecai gets away with smacking the shit out of Wallace because Wallace lets him. Julie is kind of cruel for divorcing Walden only 2 weeks after Ophelia died. Yeah, honestly, I don't know what the actual timeline was in Dodo's lore, if it was mentioned, or what the timeline was in Internet Mom's lore. But like I said, I am one of the people that is out here to slander Julie's name 6 ways to Sunday. Plus, I tried to hint in the Bad Ending series that Julie wasn't entirely confident in her marriage to Wally, so... YN in your universe doesn't have enough trauma to be where she was before she died. Not to deflect or anything, but this is just a reminder that YN is supposed to represent you, or your OC. That's the whole reason details surrounding them are so ambiguous. Their gender can be determined by you. What trauma they may or may not have can be determined by you. The only details that are set in the Bad Ending series is that they were Walden's assistant before Rags, they kinda got caught up in a love triangle between Walden and Julie, and they did die an extremely painful, horrible death. Traumatic cause of death can leave one liable to becoming a ghost. That's just how I see it. Now, if we're talking about the Hidden Rainbow AU, believe me, it's there. For the Lost Cause story arc, just see The Rainbow Factory by Aurora Dawn and replace the flight school flunkouts with convicted criminals, and then get back to me. And that'll be all for this video. There were still quite a few hot takes and comments that I didn't get to, so if you'd like me to make a part 2 to this video, let me know in the comments, and if you have a hot take you'd like me to mention, feel free to let me know. My name is BlueRibbon666, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!